creating curiosity by asking better questions. This is Shed Talk. You know, I've tried just about everything on mindset, curiosity, and built an absolutely amazing business is what I do. But you know what? Today's guest, Lisa Hammett, is one of those guests that's going to actually change the way you have perspective on positive intelligence. Now, do you know what that is? You know what, Lisa? Thanks for joining me on Shed Talk. Please tell me a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be here. So, I'm a certified positive intelligence PQ coach. Just call me a mental fitness expert. We'll talk about that later, I'm sure. I'm also a best-selling author of From Burnout to Best Life, and I'm a transformational keynote speaker.
Oh my
So
gosh, you
that's
hit just about everything here.
I'm busy.
Very busy. So, how did you get started in this?
So, after a 26-year career in the corporate retail sector, I reached burnout. Have a really ugly burnout story. Won't bore you with too many details, but suffice it to say, I was overweight, unhealthy, depressed. My marriage was strained. And in a moment of desperation, I left a long term career at a high salary without an exit strategy, which I don't recommend. And I tell my clients don't do that, even if they feel desperate, because it led to bankruptcy. Well, fortunately, I've since moved on, went through a significant wellness journey, a lot of mindset work, a lot of coaching and personal development, lost the weight. And then I actually became a health and wellness coach for one of the largest wellness companies for 11 years. And then back right before the pandemic, I actually launched my own coaching practice, got my life coaching credentials, and then became a certified positive intelligence PQ coach. Because so many people were coming to me about stress, especially around COVID. There was stress, they were burnt out, they felt lost. And was thinking, gosh, tap into my background of what I went through in the corporate sector and all of the tools, that I have accumulated along the way, and that's what my focus is. So it's really I'm on a mission to obliterate burnout in healthcare and HR. That's really my personal mission.
And that's awesome. But the question I have, and I was curious about this because it's interesting. You just said burnout. Okay.
Mhm.
So, burnt out, and all of a sudden, that stress level here. What is burnout?
Burnout is you can call it a disease. It's a mental health disorder, and it starts from chronic stress that has then morphed into burnout, which the precursor to burnout, which it can help people identify a little easier, is like tension headaches or indigestion, or maybe they're having difficulty with their cognitive abilities. It's kind of a precursor. They're very stressed, they're overwhelmed, oftentimes they're depressed and they feel lost. And when it gets so bad that you're in the burnout stage, you're just done. You just cannot imagine existing in your current environment any longer. You've hit rock bottom
And
ultimately.
when you say hitting rock bottom and you're burnt out, and what point is that change? So, how do you recognize that you're an individual out there and you're listening to this podcast, and then you're asking yourself, "Oh, I have these symptoms." What is the one thing that they should take home with that symptom to say, "Hey, listen, put and connect these two dots together. This will put you on the scale of burnout and depression, or what that is, and then bumping up to get out of that." What is that?
So, the first thing is if you're having a lot of these symptoms and you might not necessarily quite be at burnout, but you're on a fast track, seek help because burnout can be prevented. That's the first thing. Reach out to somebody, whether it's, a mentor, a therapist, a coach, what have you. But if you're feeling just lost and you're exhibiting multiple symptoms and you just get to the point of where you just cannot really function anymore, it's that's really comes to the desperate phase. And, I'm so passionate about helping people before they get to that because that's what I did and it almost cost me my marriage and it resulted in bankruptcy. And had I done a better job at managing stress, heeding the warning signs, which we often don't do if we have workaholic tendencies, for example, or maybe you're going through a divorce or you've lost your job, whatever it is, you've got to get help. Just don't ignore it. Don't try to be invincible because that's, of course, especially with men, it's like, oh, no, I'm superhuman. I can do this. I'm just going to ignore it. It's going to go away. Well, it doesn't. And then, I mean, people have died of heart attacks, strokes. They have had to actually seek serious mental health advice. Some have tried to commit suicide. I mean, it's not something that you want to mess with.
No, and you definitely can't take it for granted because everything that you're doing internally that you internalize and then all of a sudden, oh, life's really hard on me. I can't get to the next level. And then there is light at the end of the tunnel, but they can't see it. How do
Right.
you take them through that process or introducing them to that next step?
So I have quite a stage of things that we start with, but it's really trying to get them to think about what were they passionate about at one time? What are their strong suits? What are their core values? Because those all get lost in the process. And really kind of drilling down on that situation and determining really who am I and what do I want? Because that's been lost. Now, I have a foundation in mental fitness whenever I coach a client. So before we actually get to that point, I have a 12-week course that they go through, and it really helps them to identify those negative thought patterns that oftentimes they're not really aware of that are causing them to react in certain ways. And once they have awareness, then there are tools that we use that are like micro meditations and other tools that we can use when we're actually face to face with people on how to manage those situations and then shift to a positive mindset. So that's really the initial foundation. And then we go into defining, okay, who am I and where do I want to go?
And then from that, because now you've created a business model around this, is this correct?
Mhm.
And then once you started that business model, and that's where positive intelligence comes into play? That's the
Yeah, so the 12-week course is actually Positive Intelligence Mental Fitness course. We call it a PQ course, and that's a 12-week course. So that is where they have a lot of self-awareness about, their negative thought patterns and how do you shift that? How do you look at things from a positive sage perspective? Because when you are in such a toxic situation and you're just have hit rock bottom, it is so hard to be positive. And you hear about this, oh, positive mindset, everything. Oh, that's so wonderful. Well, when you're desperate and you're in that situation, to try to think of something positive, it's almost laughable. But there are steps that you can take to help you get there that are small. It's things like asking yourself, okay, what do I need right now? What do I need right now? Do I just need to get out of bed? Or, what is one small step that I can do to create that positive change? And it could be something as simple if they're learning to try to get their health and well-being back. Okay, you know what? I'm going to put my workout clothes by the bed and I'm going to see them and then put them on. That could be the first step. Or, if it's actively seeking a job, for example. Okay, well, maybe I'll just research different organizations maybe that I might be interested in, just kind of do a query and just start with one thing. But it's starting small and then moving forward.
so when you were setting all this up and the challenges of setting this up and it's absolutely amazing what you're doing. as I'm following along with it and I'm going step by step by step, there's a big approach to this. How
Mhm.
did you actually get this approach set up into an organization or a business that you set up? Like, how did you set up the model of doing this?
So, the positive intelligence, I didn't create positive intelligence mental fitness. That was created by Shirzad Shamin. He's a PhD. He wrote the best-selling book, Positive Intelligence. So I went through intensive training and certification on this. So the tools and everything that I have learned through positive intelligence, and then I have incorporated other learnings that I have developed throughout the years, some personal experiences, a lot of other applied learnings, life coaching skills, health and well-being, so I kind of molded it all together into a holistic approach to overall health and well-being. And when I went through the positive intelligence course myself, the first time, it was funny. I had a fellow coach tell me about it. They were offering like a free grant program for coaches. And said, "I don't have time. I'm too busy. I've got too many things going on." And the coach said, "Well, you should just do it. Just do it. You've got nothing to lose. It's not going to cost you anything. Just do it." It was so eye-opening to me on how you could manage stress and other negative emotions like in the moment. You hear things such as, okay, long meditations or doing yoga or, other practices, which are all phenomenal practices. But if you're in the heat of the moment and you're really stressed, especially if you're around other people, you can't just say, "Excuse me, I need to go into the closet and go, do some deep breathing exercises or, go do some yoga." You can't do that. So having the resources and the tools to be able to utilize these in the moment as these stressors are appearing so that you can dissipate them and stay in that curious, positive mindset. So you're not just reacting negatively, but you're reacting positively with curiosity and just really open to other things. Make sense?
That makes sense. And
Yeah.
digging down into the curiosity sense that here they are stressed to the nines,
Hmm.
and now they have to keep they could be at the gym, they could be in a business meeting, like you said, you can't just go in there and say, okay, wait, I gotta calm down. I gotta focus myself and get myself centered to create curiosity and to ask better questions. I better look internally to at myself. How
Yes.
hard and that difficult, like, that shift in mindset, and when I talk about that, they have to basically self-teach themselves and self-talk themselves all the way through that process.
Hmm.
You're giving them, and I don't call it life hacks. I don't I disagree with life hacks, is because it's a lifestyle change for your whole life, is that here are the tools that are going to allow you to open up to curiosity.
Hmm.
Use this formula of, okay, how to self-center, to give
Yes.
yourself back so that all of a sudden you're not squirrel all over the place, and say, all
Hmm.
right, now let's be a place of being, place of curiosity. And these are things that you are developed, sorry, they're already, you're implementing to your customers and clients to do that. Is that
Hmm.
correct?
Yes.
And then
Exactly.
once they're getting into that stage, how do you build them again to the next level?
So it's a process. So you start small and you have to develop the habit first because if you don't make these principles habits, they're not going to be instilled. So you're going to forget about them. So the first thing that you can do is in your morning routine, let's say, for example, you get up and it's noticing things like as you're walking across the floor, how do my feet feel on the floor? 'Cause I'm washing my hands, noticing how the warm water feels, the soap as I'm lathering my hands, or listening to sounds. Maybe you're out running or walking, or you're sitting outside on your patio with a cup of coffee, and you're listening to all the sounds around you, and then you're savoring that cup as you're, sipping it. You smell the aroma. noticing the warmth in the mug or cup, whichever you're using, and then you can feel the warmth as you're drinking. So it's little things like that. And we call these PQ reps. And what they do actually is they kind of just put all those negative thought patterns that might pop up that we're not even aware of, and they put us in like a level playing field, in kind of a positive, just level playing field, so that when a challenge arises, we are more open and receptive to looking at it from a different viewpoint instead of saying, oh, well, this is terrible, this is bad. So it's things like that. And then in the moment, as those stressors are occurring, there's different techniques that you can use, but it's really creating that habit and finding things throughout your day in your daily routines that you can incorporate these principles to just stay relaxed and calm and clear headed.
Hey, take a minute and smash that subscribe button, and let's get back to the episode. And it's really interesting as you were going through that. And again, I go back to the visualization, and all of a sudden, it seems that we have a tendency as humans and as a being that all of a sudden we don't take the time to enjoy where we are as being present as of right now, where you've just described it. Actually, life is about being present, smell the
Hmm.
aroma of the coffee, feeling that first step when you get out of bed, and what do your toes do versus, oh, I'm cramped, I feel this. And then all of a sudden being present. And that whole
Hmm.
present thing is that from my experience and just listening to what you're saying, is that once you become present, you become a gift to everybody out there because you're self-aware of where your surroundings are.
Hmm.
And
100%.
and then teaching that and going to the next level, is obviously taking your business, and that's where I'm gonna shift it a bit because it's interesting.
Hmm.
You talked about being present, and everybody's right now here listening to you, and we're talking about truly listening, feeling the moment. But actually, now here we are, is we're going to talk a little bit about as an entrepreneur, starting this now as in a business. Because
Hmm.
when we talk about people starting off, here we are, health, wealth, and mindset, and we're talking about yourself and what you're doing to help people become this. Well, there had to been a business in there. And now your entrepreneurship. How's been the greatest challenge with you creating this beautiful business?
Oh, that's a really good question. Challenge is just getting, it's really about marketing and getting the word out, honestly. And I love to talk. I'm sure you kind of figured that out right now. And I just love to talk to people. So just getting out there, networking, speaking, and just sharing this. And you really have to kind of walk people through it so they can understand it. Because if you're describing it sometimes, especially we're going into a lot more detail, but if you're just doing like a 30-second commercial in a networking meeting or what have you, to try to encapsulate what we're discussing, somebody's going to go, that's kind of that woo woo weird stuff. That just doesn't make any sense at all. So it's really just, I think the biggest challenge was just to get out there and just start talking about it. And I tapped into everybody that I knew and just said, "Hey, I'm super excited about this. Would you be willing just to try something?" And we have an assessment that goes with it to kind of give you an understanding of what's going on in your mind, so that it's a great way to start and lead the conversation. So I did a lot of that, and then it just started to grow, and I just started with in the speaking space, with free local speaking engagements, and then it just grew, and now people are asking me to speak, and it just starts with those small steps that at the time you're thinking, oh, this isn't going to move the needle, but when you're persistent and consistent and intentional, you get results.
Oh, that is absolutely wonderful. Now here's a big question for you. Out of all the things that you were doing, was there one thing that was works for you, that one thing that was working for you that you actually didn't recognize? That aha moment
Ooh.
goes, "Oh, I didn't realize that this would work so well." What would that be?
Well, when I first started kind of as an entrepreneur, networking is obviously the big thing. And I never in my wildest dreams thought that networking would produce what it has. I mean, if it had not been through my networking efforts, through the Chamber of Commerce and other networking organizations, I wouldn't have a business. So I would say that was in the beginning that I didn't expect. And what I think a lot of people in this type of industry or even starting out, I don't think they recognize how powerful their message can be. It's just in how they present it to people. And that there are people out there who need what you have, what you offer, but they need to learn about it. So it's how do you present it in such a way that makes them curious?
And that's interesting because I always we've talked about 4 times here about curiosity, and which is
Mhm.
it's the number one thing in humanity is curiosity because we can grow. Through curiosity, and we're gonna talk a little bit, it's kinda interesting is because you started off and you're saying your network. What was the greatest failure that you had that all of a sudden turned to great success that you didn't know you had?
Letting go of the outcome, you know, it takes a lot of personal touches and talking to a lot of people as an entrepreneur before you start to see results. And when you're so focused on, oh my gosh, I have to hit this number, I have to do this, I have to do that, you lose sight of all of the wonderful things that you have already at your disposal and all those people who could really benefit from what you have to say. And you could have a random conversation with somebody that not in your wildest dreams would you think would turn to anything, but they may either be impacted by what you're saying or they may know of somebody. And if you move them in some way, again, maybe if somebody didn't readily come to mind from them, but they were really impacted by what you said, they're going to remember that so that when they come across somebody down the road, they're like, oh, I ran into this person and wow, she had this really cool story about this mental fitness thing and how so it's things like that. The power of just conversations and letting go of any expectations that, it has to end in business or in exposure to something. It doesn't. It
And it's
doesn't. I
interest
mean, yes, you have to be intentional, but to move the needle in your business, but don't always go into a conversation with the expectation that, oh, this is going to lead to something.
And it's interesting. The biggest challenge, and you had mentioned a little bit earlier there of challenge, was that being able to, and I'm going to call it, and I'm assuming you'd understand this part. Well, obviously, you do the elevator pitch. Okay,
Hmm.
so you have a 30-second elevator pitch because how many people truly understand what you're selling, how you're doing, and you only have them for 30 seconds. Have you scaled and as an entrepreneur, a business leader, doing the things that and networking? Because you know how to you obviously networking has been so important to you. Obviously, you can't get to where you are at without
No,
networking. Wow.
no.
Do you have an elevator pitch?
I do. I have different ones actually. But if somebody asks me, so what do you do? I say I'm on a mission to obliterate burnout in healthcare and HR. And they're like, wow, tell me more about that. So that's if I'm just having a conversation. But today, and I was at my chamber networking event today and I gave a commercial that said, so, you know, did you know that the majority of New Year's resolutions fail in 2 weeks, after the start of the year? And it's because people lack intentionality and focus and the right mindset. And then I give my spiel of I'm Lisa Hammett. I'm a certified positive intelligence PQ coach, the best-selling author from Burnout to Best Life, and a transformational speaker. And I'm looking for 5 individuals who are interested in taking a short assessment to learn how their thought patterns and the resulting behavior may be impacting them in reaching their goals for the new year.
And
So,
as you're saying that, keep going. And then how would they contact you for that?
well, I was standing in a group of people.
Okay.
So they would contact me by meeting with me after the meeting.
Would you ever do this through email? Or sorry, through Zoom or
Excuse me.
anything like that?
Oh, yeah, in Zoom, if I was doing this in, like, a Zoom networking meeting, I would put my information in the chat. Reach out, if you're interested, that
Oh,
type of
I'm
thing.
I'm curious. So
So,
what so as we're going through this, I actually want you to tell me, so what is the contact to get a hold of you this way? Because this you followed right through on the elevator pitch. Somebody's curiosity just came and said, "Hey, I got a question." Well, let's just not stop it and have it at the end of the show, which we will. What would you have it right now? What's the actual way to contact you right now?
the best way to contact me is through my website, lisahammett.com,
And that gets you.
and that's it. Yep. There's all different ways on my website that can lead you to setting up a conversation with me.
It's,
So,
oh,
or I can, yeah.
no, and that's beautiful because that's where all of a sudden we're leading into that to what you're talking about, and it's going to actually hit somebody's curiosity to ask that question, and we pull it in there. Now, what do you see in the next, I don't know, say 30, 60, 90 days for yourself in 2025? I could ask about what was your challenges for 2024, and then we'll walk into, well, yeah, let's start with that one. What were your challenges in 2024?
Challenges are opportunities for really finding speaking engagements. It takes a lot of time to be pitching, people. So going out there and pitching, I do. I have a pretty significant calendar of speaking engagements, but I want more because I love to speak in front of audiences, and that does kind of lead into getting coaching clients as well and then selling my book. So I like to lead with that. So I would say the challenge with that was tapping into certain organizations to get the right contact. So I have different ways of doing it now and people who are helping me. So I would say I've kind of overcome that, but at the beginning of the year it was a little challenging.
So,
So
would you rather do talks or coaching?
I like both. And I also love writing. I like doing all. I would say that the number one thing would be speaking, but that leads into coaching because I'm selective who I work with. I'm just not going to work with anybody off the street. I want it to be a mutually beneficial relationship, and we have a discovery call just to make sure and I might not be the right person for that person as well. So I'm pretty selective on who I work with. And yes, I do like having clients. I absolutely adore coaching, but there's nothing better in my opinion than getting up in front of a group of engaged, curious people. And I am really interactive. I tell people when I do a keynote, "Don't put me on a stage behind a podium. That's not me. I need to walk through the crowd. So if you wanna know how to lay out the room, then make it so that I can walk through the crowd and ask questions because that is what I love to do." And I, build a lot of my presentations based on the feedback that I get from the audience. So it's very rewarding.
So, when you did your first TED Talk,
Mhm.
what was that experience like for you?
Well, it ties in really well to the whole positive intelligence because I had a microphone incident. So prior to going on stage, have you ever done a TED Talk?
I'm scheduled to come up to do one at TED Talk coming up. So,
Outstanding.
yeah.
So, in my experience doing the TED Talk, you practice, you have to memorize what you're going to say. And that was the first time I ever had to memorize something. So, that was a little unnerving right there. But the day of the event, I felt great. I felt confident on what I was going to say. I was doing mental fitness exercises. I was calm. I was focused. So I got out on stage, and not 10 seconds in, the MC I hear says, "Lisa, Lisa." And I'd already started my presentation. And I thought, I'm hearing something because, that's just weird. And I just kind of kept going. And then she rushed over and she said, "Your microphone's not on." So when they had taken me into the green room and tested the mic, they turned it off. They didn't leave it on. So I'm looking at the audience, and I was in such a great headspace because I was doing all of these mental fitness exercises that I just looked out and I just kind of shrugged, did a curtsy, just, whatever. And the audience is looking at me horrified, like, oh my gosh, this is going to be an epic fail. And then she said, okay, would you please, begin again after she had her arm literally up the back of my shirt and my jacket trying to get to the device to turn it back on. So I started and I gave a great TED Talk. So, that is just a testimony that in the moment when things go wrong, these techniques, they really work. And I tell people if you ever have any desire to do a TED Talk, you should do it. It is a great experience. It's very different from any other speaking engagement that you'll probably ever deliver because you can't really interact with the audience. I mean, I did to a degree that, I was demonstrating some things and I said, let's do this together. But it's not like you can ask them questions because they don't want you to do that. They just want thought leaders to present on a particular thought and provide impact.
Wow. Now, when you
Oh,
did that and you finished it off,
mhm.
did it feel like a badge of honor that, all right, I got that under my belt, the TED Talk's done, and it's like, whew, now what's next? Was that the beginning
So,
stage of everything?
yeah, so it's interesting. So my book happened to come out within weeks prior to me doing this TED Talk. Actually, it's the opposite. I did the TED Talk first, and then weeks after, my book came out. And those 2 things just propelled me into the speaking circuit. And I started getting people asking me to speak. I did a lot of things locally, and then I started getting people, asking if I would travel, and I said, "Yes, of course, if I get paid."
Yeah.
So, but it was great. So, that really, I think, made me more credible because there is still a lot of credibility in TED Talks. I've always enjoyed watching them myself. And I didn't really realize until I delivered one that, you know what, they really do give an impact and people pay attention when you do a TED Talk.
That's amazing. All right. So now the next question comes in to finalize that one. Next 30, 60, 90 days for you or the next
So I
year.
have some speaking engagements I'm working on. My big thing is I'm starting my second book. Well, I shouldn't say starting because I have a lot of the content already and in an outline. And I just kind of have to put it together and add some other things. So the big focus is going to be on my book because my goal is by the end of August to have my second book, which will be Blooming Beyond Burnout. And it'll be, excuse me, kind of a companion piece to my first book, but it's going to have more stories because the reviews that I had received on my first book were all very positive. They really enjoyed it. They said, but we wanted more stories. Like, okay, I can do that. I have a lot of stories. So I'll be incorporating, client stories, obviously anonymously, and personal stories, and just other things that I've heard throughout
You,
life.
you know what, Lisa? This has been outstanding. And I hope our listeners are enjoying this because I want them right now to smash and like this episode on Shed Talk. And Lisa, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Shed
Thank
Talk
you.
with Kevin Halliday. Thank
Thank you.
you.
This has been great. I appreciate it. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Now you know. Shed Talk.